This time on Watchers of Tomorrow, the needs of the many outweighs the needs of the lady.
Hello everybody, welcome to Watchers of Tomorrow. My name is Gepwin. I am joined as always by my good friend and co-host Dr. Izix.
Hi.
And this is the most famous and some argue the very best episode of the original Star Trek run, City on the Edge of Forever.
Indeed. Wait, it kind of took us forever to get here. Hope that's not a bad sign.
Well, it didn't take us that forever to get here. This is the penultimate episode of Season 1.
Yes. Just one more after this, then we're done with Season 1. How weird.
This is a 3-season show. It has 79 episodes. We are currently on episode 29. Or we are on episode 28, actually. But that means we still have more than 50 episodes left.
Indeed.
So if it peaked here...
We're in some trouble here.
Yeah.
Overall, I'd say that I enjoyed this episode. There was some weirdness, but, it's kind of... I've kind of gotten used to that at this point.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I agree it is the best one we've seen so far, definitely. Though, weirdly enough, I feel like that played into it seeming a little worse than it should have otherwise.
Yes. The expectations were sort of pumped up, and you're like, oh, this is going to be great. Oh, that was just kind of good, yeah.
Yeah, the expectations, but then also the quality of writing in this episode, especially for like the dialogue and things, is such a step up from the other episodes. It's basically not even the same characters.
Yes, it's like, right, these are like kind of like relatable people now. This is weird.
This episode went through what we would now call development hell.
And somehow survived.
It's credited as being written by Harlan Ellison, who's a very well-known sci-fi writer, if very controversial.
A bit of a whole bunch of other stuff, including an episode of The Simpsons, apparently.
Probably well-known for some books like A Boy and His Dog and the short story I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream.
Not to be confused with, I Have a Mouth and Ice Cream.
Yes.
It's a little different.
That's just about a kid on a hot summer day.
Who might have a dog too,
Got hired for writing on Star Trek before they even aired the first pilot. The episode that they picked up, rather. Because he won an award for an Outer Limits episode.
They're like, hey, we want your brain here. Could you help us out, please?
So they started making this script very early on, and it took them almost the entire run of the season to get it to a workable format, including rewrites by DC Fontana, Gene Kuhn, Gene Roddenberry, Stephen Carbaccio.
So everyone was commenting on this here.
Yeah, anyone who's ever written for Star Trek, basically. And Ellison wound up hating this episode.
That's too bad.
It's pretty well documented that he really hated what they did to this episode. And after seeing some interviews, I kind of agree with him that they ruined his basic kind of core emotional concept that he was working with in his original script.
But, there might be, some, leeway, because this is only an hour of television. We're going full Harlan Ellison. We might need like 2 hours or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely an amount of this original script that was bloat, and I think we'll go into a bit of that after the synopsis, because otherwise it does get confusing. But his original script definitely had some bloat to it that would have needed to be removed for it to fit into a television format. But I think there's a couple of key changes that they made that completely recontextualize how the characters are acting and thinking in the episode that I agree kind of ruins the emotional message that they're going for. So the main guest star of this episode is someone that you may have actually heard of.
Holy smokes.
Joan Collins plays someone credited as Sister Edith Keeler.
She's a nun?
I don't know.
Or is she just somebody's sister?
The sister part comes from the credits. This is how the character is credited. She's never referenced as sister in the episode itself, and the kind of love story thing suggests that she is probably not a nun.
she doesn't really come off as a nun. She doesn't really talk religion at all. Talks about other stuff, but
One of the things that I said suggested that some of the inspiration for this character was an evangelist named Amy McPherson, who was sometimes known as Sister Amy, but was also not a nun.
So sort of more inspired by sort of relations here, yes.
Yeah, but no one was a nun, yet they're still called Sister in the credits, but never in the episode. I don't know.
But Joan Collins, some of the stuff she's, I guess, most known for is this little show called Dynasty.
Yeah.
Which is a long-running soap opera. She was on it for a huge-ass long time in the 80s or something like that.
The other person that I thought was interesting to mention as a guest star was Bartel LaRue, who you may not have heard of.
The Guardian.
But they voiced the Guardian.
Yeah, we've actually seen him before.
They are a very well-known voice actor.
Mm-hmm.
They did work in Star Trek, obviously, Mission Impossible, The Brady Bunch.
The Time Tunnel as well.
Yeah,
very appropriate.
They've been in basically everything. I always love it when you find a random voice actor, and it's I've never heard this name before, but they've been in 100 shows I've watched.
Wait a moment. No wonder I keep feeling familiar with these characters. So, he'll be back again in more episodes of Star Trek, because we already seen him in the Squire Gothos. We'll be seeing him in the Game Master Triskelion, Patterns of Force, Bread and Circuses, The Savage Curtain.
All right, we've got a lot of ground to cover, and we already spent longer than normal on our intro.
Well, we had a short episode last week, so we could have a little bit longer today. So.
Yeah, I hope so. I honestly thought there'd be more to talk about in this episode, and I was struggling to find anything we haven't talked about 5 times before, but...
It's very straightforward, and, it's, I guess, maybe it touches on some of the things we've talked about previously better.
Maybe. We join the Enterprise that is examining a planet that is emanating time waves.
Yes, there's sirens and flashes and shakes. Oh my.
It's buffeting the ship around, and Sulu gets knocked out by one of those pesky console explosions.
Yes, just suddenly bam, and then he's on the ground and he's dying or something. I guess.
For all of the technological and social advances that Star Trek seems to have in this future, OSHA was not one of them.
Yeah, it's almost like they designed these consoles to explode or something. I don't know. Maybe that's the only way they're for sure going to have people ever dying.
McCoy is brought to the bridge to revive Sulu, and he decides that he's bad enough that he needs to risk giving him a drug called cordrazine. Kirk warns the doctor that this drug is tricky to work with.
McCoy just says I'm just going to stab him, and then Sulu wakes up and he seems fine. And McCoy's like, hey, what was that medical comment, Captain?
McCoy gets to be smug about how he saved a guy's life with dangerous drugs for about 10 seconds before the ship getting knocked sideways again makes him stab himself in the stomach with his own hypospray and inject the entire thing into himself.
This can't be good. What are the side effects to this, eh?
We don't know yet, but it's bad because he starts yelling about killers and runs to the turbolift.
It's assassins, murderers, killers!
McCoy apparently runs all the way to the transporter room, knocks out the operator, and beams himself to the planet. They need some security in these transporter rooms. This is the 4th time this has happened in 3 episodes.
Oh, I should add another ward to here. Just give me a moment.
Spock finds the library files on cordrazine, and they have reports that large doses have caused extreme paranoia to the point that McCoy is now an imminent danger to himself and everyone around him.
This seems like a good reason to not let him run off.
Yeah. That they have no security on this ship for anything.
Well, the security does eventually show up, but, it just takes them a while.
Well, speaking of the security, 2 security guards beam down to the planet with Kirk, Spock, Uhura, and Scotty for some reason.
Well, and just in case they need to fix McCoy like an engine.
Yeah, I don't know why Uhura is there either.
Well, maybe they figured that the time waves that might make communications difficult, so they need someone who knows what they're doing there.
Fine. Use story logic.
Well, it's kind of more interesting if Scotty and Uhura are also there. They're really not any good reason to have them there.
Yeah. They start searching for McCoy, but he's comically hiding behind rocks.
Yes.
Just pops his head out every now and then like a Bugs Bunny cartoon.
I'm going to go creep over here.
Kirk gets distracted by a big sparkly stone ring that talks.
Yes, the giant donut of infinity here.
The ring introduces itself as the Guardian of Forever.
I am the Guardian of Forever.
Apparently a being and a machine, or neither, that is its own beginning and end, but that's about as far as we get because apparently humans are too stupid to understand what this thing is anyway.
It's just going because, it's just being vague because you just wouldn't get it, man. Come on.
It's not that I didn't know how to write this, you just wouldn't understand. The Guardian, unprovoked, starts to show scenes of Earth history, like knights and people running around on horses and things, and he announces it as a gateway to our own past.
Yes, the past of stock footage.
Sepia-tone stock footage, though.
Hey, because, it's the past. Of course, that's what color it was.
Yeah, everyone knows the past was just washed out video. Kirk wonders if they could use this to go back in time a day and prevent McCoy from injecting himself. Already trying to play fast and loose with time travel here.
Well, this is Kirk. He does that.
Spock says that the portal is moving through history too fast for them to be able to pinpoint an exact day, let alone a week.
Well, I guess we got a bit, we could relive a month. That's fine. Whatever.
Spock immediately just starts chastising himself for not having started recording what's going on with his tricorder so that they could, examine all of human history. So, I'll give him that. That's a good idea.
Yeah, it's like, oh, yeah, there's all this history that, we kind of have to rely on, potentially inaccurate records about to really get a good feed on. So maybe let's record this here.
But while he is distracted, McCoy runs up. Do we remember McCoy? Because they didn't.
He's running around here and still into his paranoid delusions here.
He jumps through the portal and disappears.
Whee!
All of a sudden, Uhura has lost contact with the ship, and the Guardian tells them that, in fact, the ship is gone.
What happened?
As well as everything they have ever known.
Well, I guess it's lucky that they're within the time vortex here near the Guardian. Otherwise, they'd also be vanished from history.
Yeah, I noticed they didn't even technobabble that one.
But it was kind of easy to sort of extrapolate given that there's all sorts of weirdness going on here.
So now to fix things, Kirk has to go back in time for the third time.
Yes. Let's go back in time. Now, should we do more, Back to the Future this time, or what you feeling there?
I don't remember the Back to the Future song well enough.
Back in time, do 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 do. That's all I remember.
I know they awkwardly shoehorn 88 miles an hour into the lyrics somewhere. Spock uses the recording thingy that he made to have the Guardian replay time and then understand exactly when they should jump in, and they'll maybe be a week or so off of when McCoy got there.
And hopefully they'll be able to run into it before he goes and changes history, and everything will be great.
Yeah, you would hope.
Yeah, even the Guardian's if you fix time, you'll just kind of pop back here.
Yeah, you'll just magically come back. It's fine. Kirk and Spock jump into the gate and appear in what we later learn is New York City, 1930.
We're back in the Great Depression, guys. Hooray! Wait.
Yay! Kirk very uncharacteristically notices that they are dressed oddly and decides that they should steal some clothes that are hanging out to dry.
Yes, I guess it's good on their initiative, but still, it's risky, guys. It's right out in the middle of the daytime.
Yeah, it's daytime. Also, it's the Great Depression. You're definitely hurting someone.
Yes. These are probably someone's work clothes. They might need them to go to that job they're barely holding on to.
While Kirk is in the middle of explaining how easy they're going to have it here with barbaric laws and whatever, a police officer comes up and accosts them for stealing clothes.
And it's kind of hilarious scene here because, Kirk was just talking about how easy it would be to explain things, and then he just totally fumbles explaining anything.
Yeah, Kirk spends a few minutes babbling about how Spock is obviously Chinese and his ears got stuck in a rice picker when he was a kid.
Mechanical rice picker.
Yeah,
that's
stupid and racist.
And and Spock's just kind of letting him dig his the hole deeper here in kind of an amused fashion.
Mm-hmm. They get tired of this exercise, do a look over there, and Spock knocks out the police officer.
Neck bench.
They both run away into the basement of a building with a sign reading 21st Street Mission.
This might be important.
Once there, they change their clothes, and they are soon discovered by a young woman named Edith.
Edith.
She challenges them on their trespassing, but Kirk, for some reason, decides to just tell the truth about how they're stealing clothes and running from the cops, and she goes, "Oh, cool, you want a job then?"
You seem trustworthy.
Two random men who are running from the police have hidden in my basement. Get cleaning.
Well, maybe she just really hates cops.
Yeah, can't blame her.
Yeah.
Kirk and Spock go into the mission to eat, and a random man who is for some reason very weird about how he gets free food at this mission is telling them that they're going to be sorry because if they eat there, they have to listen to Edith talk.
So I guess you're not a fan of her speeches here.
Yeah, I don't understand the issue. Like, you can ignore this. Like, just eat and ignore the person talking. At first, I thought it was like she was going to get up there and sing really badly or something because there was a piano. Yes. But no, she just gets up there and gives a judgy speech.
I wouldn't say it's totally judgy. It's very idealistic.
It starts very judgy.
Yeah, she does start off with, if you're a bum or, you're on the booze and you're unwilling to do, anything, then I have no time for you. But everybody else, here's some cool stuff about the future maybe being awesome.
Well, it starts with if you're just a bum who's lazy, or if you can't get off the booze, get out, I don't care about you. Then it's also like, I know everyone's life is horrible, but just barely scrape by and survive, because maybe in the future things will be better. Probably too late for you, though.
Thanks, lady. I'm already in my 60s, and I don't have any work.
But she's somehow weirdly accurately predicts the future of atomic energy and spaceflight.
I guess she's up on her current scientific hypotheses.
Kirk and Spock get a room, and a few days later, we see Kirk returning from work and Spock building a computer out of random vacuum tubes and a Jacob's ladder straight out of a Frankenstein movie.
And just so folks know, the Jacob's ladder, I'm pretty sure serves absolutely no purpose here.
Yeah, well, it can't. It never serves any purpose in anything. It's a toy.
Yeah, it's like, even in the crazy sci-fi, bend all the logic, it's kind of useless here.
He asks if Kirk can bring him a block of platinum, and Kirk gets really annoyed that Spock is spending all of their hard-earned money on computer parts. She's like, what else are you trying to set up a life here? What else are you going to spend money on, Kirk? How do you even understand money?
Well, maybe Kirk doesn't. That's the problem.
Edith arrives and offers them more work, but this is apparently just an excuse for them to see a man repairing a clock with a set of fine tools that Spock eyes greedily.
With that, I will not have to be building something using these, chisels and stone tools.
That night, they break into the safe and steal the things, but Edith catches them. She's not very bothered by it, and then she goes out on a date with Kirk.
Well, there's also a little exchange where Edith, sort of injects the word captain after Spock says something, and, she's like, he always says it even when he doesn't say it, sort of thing.
Yeah, it's a weird, I don't know, I didn't like that scene even a little bit. It was very weird.
It was a little awkward, yeah.
And kind of pointless. Edith and Kirk stroll outside, where she talks more about how, they're obviously, served together in the military or something. Mm-hmm. And Kirk tells her that hundreds of years in the future, there'll be a famous novel written on the theme of "Let me help" instead of "I love you," and he points to a star and goes, he'll live on that planet, and there's no point to this at all.
Well, I guess it does give me an opportunity to point out my knowledge about astronomy. Because it's like some planet around that star, the thing is the leftmost one of Orion's belt, right?
Yeah, isn't that a nebula?
Well, there is a nebula in Orion, but I believe that one's Alnalon. The middle one is Alnatok, and the one on the right is Mintaka. I used to watch Stargazer with Jack Horkheimer, so.
So at least you got something out of this pointless exercise.
Yep. Well, I will also say that this is sort of, showing that Kirk and Edith are kind of getting personal.
A little. All it tells me is Kirk is really stupidly telling her about the future for some unknown reason.
Well, she seems idealistic. Maybe he figures that she'll be like, yeah, he's like me. He's hitting on me.
Is he? This is their first actual scene together, and they have no chemistry. And he's basically talking nonsense about how "Let me help" becomes some sort of pivotal message in a novel that we don't have or cannot have any knowledge of.
So it is a little awkward, yes.
Meanwhile, Spock has gotten his computer hooked up to a screen and is showing newspaper clippings about how Edith dies in a car accident.
Oh no, she dies.
But it's only for a second because the screen goes all wibbly, and then Kirk comes back and Spock fires up the computer again, and this time the newspaper headline shows Edith, but has a thing about her meeting with the president about a peace movement. And then the computer explodes.
FDR meets with Slum Angel or something like that. Yeah, it's the headline. Big picture of Edith.
Spock tells Kirk that they are contradicting headlines because there's one where she dies and one where she becomes an incredibly important political figure and probably can't do both of those things.
Yeah, so it seems like there's some sort of divergent timeline situation going on here. So whatever happened is involving Edith somehow.
So something involves Edith, and one of these two timelines is the one that leads to the future where the Enterprise doesn't exist, but they don't know which one.
Yes, apparently she dies of a traffic accident.
And they say that they need to figure this out, but McCoy is still coming, and he's a weird random element.
Yes.
Speaking of McCoy, he suddenly appears in the street in full view of a man who's stealing milk for no other reason than to have him drop milk on the street.
Oh, I guess the guy would, technically be stealing milk because he's thirsty, but how the scene works out is exactly that.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I'm going to have something fragile that could go crash on the ground here.
Immediately after this, we cut back to the house where Kirk and Edith are talking about dreams of spending all the money that they spend on war on peaceful stuff and then making out.
Yeah.
We then immediately cut back to McCoy, who's running around yelling about things until he passes out, and the man that he was yelling at finds a phaser in his pants and accidentally vaporizes himself.
So what if the random element was this guy?
I know. This is my preferred episode.
Oh no, the random guy that was on the street there just randomly he was essential for the timeline of the future. Oh no.
Yeah, apparently he wasn't important. McCoy wakes up in the morning, finds his way back to the same mission that Kirk and Spock are working at. He looks really terrible because he's got splotches on his face and bad makeup. And then Edith sees him. She takes him upstairs to rest.
Okay. He comes in there because he smells coffee and it's like, I want coffee, man. And he's like, I can't stay though. They're going to get me. And she's like, well, we got a cotton bag. We can hide you.
Spock got his computer working again and now knows exactly which timeline they need. Edith needs to die.
Oh no.
Apparently, if Edith lives, she starts a nationwide pacifist movement that prevents the U.S. from entering World War II, letting the Nazis have enough time to complete nuclear weapons and win the war.
This seems like a bad move overall.
It all seems a little fishy.
Yeah.
In the mission, McCoy has recovered enough where he can talk to people, but he believes everything that he's seeing is a hallucination. We have another pretty pointless scene about him talking about how everything isn't real.
Well, I will give them some credit here that McCoy has some good character building here, in that he's like, okay, this is really weird. I have some good guesses about what's going on, but all of them make no sense. So either I'm hallucinating all of this, or it's even worse than I thought.
Yeah, it's not bad, but overall it's just weird, awkward padding that doesn't really go anywhere narratively.
True.
Later, Kirk prevents Edith from tripping down some stairs, and then they make out some more. And Spock is like, you should have just let her trip down the stairs. What if you saved her life? And he's like, idiot, she dies in a car accident.
It's okay to save her life now, but not later. Okay.
Back in the mission, McCoy has willed himself into a better state and gotten out of bed. He talks to Edith about how grateful he is for her help, and she is equally, talkative but can't stay very long because she has a date with this guy she's going to see a movie with. And they make a big deal about how McCoy doesn't know who Clark Gable is.
Clark who?
She leaves and meets Kirk outside. Kirk is equally confused about who Clark Gable is, and this leads her to saying, oh, McCoy also didn't know who that was. And he goes, McCoy, oh my god! And they run back across the street to where McCoy is just coming out of the mission doors.
And Spock is there too, suddenly.
Yeah, they call over Spock, and they all have a great happy reunion. Edith begins slowly walking across the street towards them, but doesn't see a big old truck coming towards her.
Well, I will say that, moments before, Kirk also, kept her from being going over because she wasn't paying attention.
Yeah, she doesn't pay attention to the crossing the street. McCoy tries to rush out and save her, but Kirk holds him back until the car hits her, and McCoy goes, do you know what you did? And Spock goes, he knows.
Yes.
He's sad now. They're all magically returned to the ruined city. The Guardian says, hey, time's back to normal. You want to go see more history stuff? And Kirk says, no, I'm leaving.
In fact, he says, let's get the hell out of here.
Yep.
And then they beam up, and that's the episode. Yeah, I think that's a very good response to this whole situation. No, let's get out of here. Like, let's not do that anymore.
So see, everyone talked about this as this big emotional payoff and this, like, what Star Trek's really about, making big decisions that you have to mull over and whatever. One, it's a glorified trolley problem.
A little bit.
Two, they don't mull over it or have any emotionally impactful decision-making or anything.
Well, I will say that at some points it kind of seems like Kirk's wavering, but he doesn't really kind of waver explicitly enough.
Not really.
To really sort of sell
he
it.
has one scene where he very dramatically tells Spock, I'm in love with Edith Keeler, like a normal human says. And then that's about it. He says, I'm falling in love with her, and that's it. He just lets her die at the end. Now, this is the bit that I really agreed with in an interview I saw, where Ellison said in his original version of the script, Kirk runs to save her and Spock holds him back, which would give you an actual emotional payoff. His ending to the episode was Kirk is willing to sacrifice the future to be with this person that he loves, and Spock stops him.
Yeah.
That would be an actual emotional payoff.
Yeah, I'd have to agree there. I will disagree that it didn't have any payoff. That one would have been a lot better.
They didn't really have, like, much. Like, McCoy tries to save her and Kirk stops him, which is this is just reinforcing that Kirk was never going to let her get killed. There was no doubt that he was going to let this happen.
Yes.
Which arguably makes his, like, weird little infatuated love story with her highly unethical.
A little bit, so... it's like, yeah, I don't mind if I, hit it and then you die. It's all good, right?
That's it. He has no emotional connection to this woman. They try to set it up, but the combination of this kind of bad payoff at the end, like Shatner's wooden acting, and the amount of bloat that they put into the episode elsewhere to keep them from having more than 3 scenes together, kind of ruins anything that makes it seem like they're actually having a love story.
Overall, pretty good episode, but, cut out some bits and add more other stuff elsewhere.
And then, I know this isn't exactly the point, but I just can't get my head out of this space. That's like, the crux problem of the episode does not exist. Like, their conceit that a pacifist movement started by this woman lets the Nazis win World War II is ridiculous in any way you can approach it.
A tad bit, it doesn't really kind of follow at all as far as general trends would be. Though there was admittedly during the 30s and early 40s a bit of a strong sense of isolationism as far as American foreign policy, not necessarily pacifism.
Yeah, there was a strong anti-war movement, but it was entirely based on isolationism.
As opposed to like just let's not have war. Yeah, it's more of a let's let everyone else sort of deal with their own problems.
Yeah, what happens in Europe has no effect on us over here. Why should we worry about it? We've got our own problems.
Like this old Great Depression thing,
So there's that. There's like, they didn't want to enter the war in the first place, which means the pacifism movement would have had to have been enough of a absolute pacifism. Like there's like 5 kinds of pacifism here. This would be absolute pacifism, which means no violence ever, no matter what, even in self-defense.
Doesn't matter if you're being invaded or you're being punched in the face. You need to totally chill out. Everything's good.
So it would have had to be an absolute pacifism movement strong enough to prevent the United States from entering World War II after Pearl Harbor.
Which would be pretty ridiculous, honestly.
So it falls apart there. But then, even if the United States didn't enter World War II, most historians agree that all the U.S. did was speed up the inevitable fall of the Third Reich.
There's still that whole Soviet Union business they were dealing with.
Yeah,
it would been a lot bloodier and a lot longer of a fight, but would have eventually ground them down.
It would have lasted a few more years, but Russia would have defeated Germany. Like, it was inevitable at that point in the war.
Mm-hmm.
So the U.S. not entering the war would not have let the Nazis develop their secret superweapon program, which they were done experimenting with heavy water by 1935. They had successful heavy water plants.
They maybe wanted more heavy water, but yeah.
Nothing would have changed. The U.S. wouldn't have entered World War II. It would have never had the economic boom from all of the war factories suddenly switching over to civilian manufacture with little war damage. We would have never lifted ourselves out of the Great Depression, and we wouldn't have become a global superpower.
So it would be a very divergent timeline still, but not quite as they're sort of suggesting.
We don't know what would have happened. We arguably, if the USSR and the United States weren't having a worldwide pissing contest, we probably wouldn't have had the space race. So, the Star Trek future wouldn't happen, but the Nazis wouldn't have won.
There was too many things going against them. Pretty much everyone except the U.S., going against them is kind of enough.
You could argue that fascism under Stalin in the USSR would have spread, and that could have been bad.
Yes. All right, maybe that's the real alternative future.
Maybe they're not allowed to say that, because the USSR did have a great deal of power at this time period, including forcing a character into the second season.
Yep.
Which we'll get to in a couple episodes.
Well, I will, have, I guess, two things I want to mention here. First off, if this alternative universe where the Nazis did win World War II, it was, according to this episode, the inevitable outcome of this alternative timeline, then obviously that's where you get the Man in the High Castle. That's that timeline.
Yes. I could not get through the first episode of that on Amazon.
It's a bit of it's a tricky watch. I'm partway through season 2. Anyway, the other thing I wanted to sort of I guess jump off from here is that this pacifism idea isn't necessarily something that fits well with the 30s, but it maybe resonates better in the 60s.
Yeah.
So maybe we should mention get on to the hippies there again.
Yeah, well, there was definitely a rising pacifist movement in the 60s for Vietnam and Korea, which were two really dumb wars that we were involved in.
It's like, well, Korea, things are just kind of stalemate, like forever, like still. And then Vietnam, things were just kind of madness all over the place. And it's like, well, we're not really even sure what we're fighting for because everyone here is just kind of assholes.
Yeah, which that's the other thing that really got me with this episode and why I honestly often feel like I'm watching a 100% different show than everyone else is when I read other critiques of Star Trek. Because this episode didn't have a high concept. It was a weird propaganda-y anti-pacifism episode that they somehow had to gel with their pre-existing conceit that peace, which we never actually see in the rest of the show, but this idea that peace on Earth and a global government is what allowed this level of space exploration and future technology. But in this episode, they have to try to gel that with an anti-pacifist message.
Well, I guess in some ways, this might be an opportunity for us to sort of, I guess, compare and contrast with something here a little bit.
Yeah.
So, this is sort of like, wagging its finger at sort of the, left-leaning, pacifist sort of thing, let's, give peace a chance sort of folks. But it's sort of backdoor and endorsing a different sort of leftist sort of philosophy, the Antifa movement. So let's punch some Nazis. For those who are unaware of or have gotten weird information from the last couple years, because it has been sort of back in the news, Antifa is a shortening of words that's all about that originally came from the term anti-fascist or anti-fascist action that in the sort of started in the 1920s as a response to the growing fascism in Italy, where you have these black shirt paramilitary fascist guys promoting Mussolini, kind of roughing up everything. And so people are like, we don't like this anymore. Let's resist it something, And so, and so there's sort of different movements of that sort, of all sorts of different ideologies before the Second World War. During the Second World War, they got pretty well stamped out, but a lot of the elements and people there continued on as were like resistance members and things like that during the war. After the war, the focus of Antifa became much more either left wing or anarcho communist, and certainly other that phrase there. That they were very much explicitly anti-fascist explicitly, but they were also co-opted in a lot of the Eastern Europe countries to sort of be brought into the new communist state system as sort of we're this, despite the whole dictator stuff, whatever. But elsewhere in the world is very much like, no, dictators are bad still, so let's like be against that. And so that's sort of the inception of the more modern Antifa sort of a dealio here. And they're the more recent incarnation, at least in the U.S., is generally on the left wing still, and is very sort of anti-authoritarianism in various forms. Now, feel free to jump in here if you like.
Well, it's interesting on that because they're being very anti-pacifism, but if you bring in something like Antifa and other anti-fascist movements, there's a lot of discussion, and it's kind of the crux argument when you get into discussing pacifism as a moral philosophy, is what do you do with fascism? Mm-hmm. Because the basic idea, if you're going with something as hardline as like absolute pacifism, which is what they're suggesting is happening here, yes. That is working off of the conceit that all sides are looking for something that you can negotiate, you just haven't.
Let's all talk to each other, and everything will work out if we just talk to each other. So give peace a chance, man.
Yeah, but if you're dealing with something like authoritarianism and fascism, where violent takeover is pretty much built in, mm-hmm. There's no middle ground between we want to operate as an independent nation and we want you all dead. There is no middle ground to come to a compromise on.
So it's like, well, I guess that whole talking to each other isn't going to necessarily work here.
Yeah, which gets us to the much more usable and much more often realistic and what most people actually practice, conditional pacifism. Which is pacifism is a good idea, and it's what we should always shoot for, is nonviolent solutions that cause as little damage as possible. But mm-hmm. there are times when violence and military action is necessary, usually in self-defense or the defense of others.
There's not really a, quote, total just war here, but we're going to try to avoid it if we can, manage it.
Though, it's interesting to note that during the 30s and 40s, we didn't really have a problem with fascism.
Yeah, the U.S. was sort of like, we're going to keep doing our own thing here, but we're not going to be like totally ideologically opposed to it.
Yeah. Europe's kind of an issue. We had the Olympics in Nazi Germany. The U.S. took part in that. So we didn't have that much of a problem with a fascist government.
Get along, play along, everything's gonna be great.
It wasn't really until later that, the anti-fascism became part of the propaganda, and it wasn't even until fairly late into the war, basically when we've already won, that the actual atrocities that the Nazis were carrying out during World War II became widely known. It wasn't like we went into World War II and went, these guys are genociding people over there. Like, we weren't in there fighting the Holocaust. Most people in America didn't know about this. And a lot of the U.S., including a lot of the major leadership, agreed with the anti-Semitic sentiments that the Nazis had.
So it's like, well, you're monstrous, but we're also okay with that, monstrous. But we do have a little bit of issue with you attacking our military bases here and beating up our allies a little bit too much. Whoops.
World War II was not this big righteous let's go in fight evil thing that everyone remembers it now. It got turned into that later because, as it turned out, the people you were fighting were doing monstrous things to people.
Yes, and it's very justification after the fact.
Which, it's fine. They were even without knowing all of the horrible stuff they were doing, they were still doing horrible things that were publicly around. People knew about this. We should have entered the war earlier, and we didn't because of our, xenophobic isolationism.
Wasn't FDR like campaigning on keeping America out of war?
Yeah, I believe he was. If it hadn't been for Pearl Harbor, the U.S. wouldn't have entered World War II. And I think this episode bothers me a little bit because of this kind of it's just the American exceptionalism again.
It's like, America is the only power that really matters during the 20th century, clearly, right?
And then pacifism is holding us back from exceptionalism.
And that is badness, apparently.
And the way that they try to gel it is just this weird line where Kirk says she has the right idea and peace really was the answer, but not now.
Yeah.
Which begs the question, when? Because this is obviously...
60s?
Well, see, that's the thing. You get into the 60s, and I think in later seasons, you do get a little more of a countercultural leaning, where you are going more into the... Vietnam is kind of silly. Maybe we should listen to the peaceful ideas. But we've gotten so many episodes in this first season that critique the idea that we can be nonviolent at all, and have literally called out pacifism as a negative thing in the past.
And, the times that we apparently can be pacifists, we have to also be super powerful energy beings.
Yes. I think specifically about this side of Paradise, where it was such an obvious critique of the hippie movement and of peaceful coexistence, to the point that Kirk's entire motivation for fighting it was that being nonviolent and content is bad and will harm people.
It's just inherently terrible, I guess. Huh?
Yeah, so they keep coming back to this violence is good idea that seems to be propping up the ideas of the time, the government line of Vietnam is this good, just war we are fighting, and pacifism is going to hurt us. You could read this episode as saying, if we let this pacifist movement take over, the Russians are going to become as bad as the Nazis and take over the world, and this glorious future we have is never going to happen.
Oh no, our glorious future that we just keep doing the same thing over and over again with.
Even though you play into this idea to try to develop this non-existent love story everyone keeps going on about, that Kirk and Edith have similar worldviews, that they both love peace and look forward to this future technology and everyone benefiting from immense power of technology and spaceflight and things. But she wants to have pacifism and peaceful coexistence now, and we're told that is 100% bad, and that trying that will actually ruin the future she's dreaming of.
Now, that is a little troubling, Well, I think, though, this is maybe a way to sort of segue into how... sort of the, I guess, quote, the establishment sort of portrays movements like pacifism and things like that. That it, implies that maybe all of pacifism is this absolute pacifism, and there's not, sort of different flavors of it.
Yeah.
It sort of, I guess, spackles over with this, okay, if you believe any of this, you're obviously on this camp entirely of this specific flavor of it, as opposed to the other sort of, like more pragmatic or consequentialist sort of stuff here. As far as alternative forms of pacifism, and so obviously, if you're going to be on, we're painting you in this light with these sort of pieces of evidence to make you look as bad as possible to discourage the other forms of pacifism as well.
I don't know exactly if there's like an intentional misunderstanding of the nature of pacifism, as much as there is kind of a response to the threat of the military economic powerhouse that we built up during the Cold War. Because so much of our economy right now in the United States is based on upholding our military.
Yeah, is it $700 billion now or something like that?
Yes.
Each year?
And that's contracts for building fighter planes that they have in some states, and contracts for building tanks, and just all this like arguably unnecessary stuff that we manufacture to uphold the military.
Oh, and it's more than just manufacture. Sort of full disclosure, folks, I was myself a military contractor for a little while.
Yeah, so was some people in my family. Like I basically, anybody who's worked for a long enough time in like physics or computer science has worked for the military at some point in their careers.
It's a little tricky to avoid because, like, well, I need like to get paid sometime. What are my options? But I will also point out that sort of from my own experiences there, that there was I guess money being pushed towards stuff that I guess good for the whole military readiness, et cetera stuff. There's money being pushed towards basic research, which is applicable well beyond military considerations. There's also a bunch of money that was kind of not really going anywhere useful.
And despite that, like there's valid budgeting critiques to be made. But I'm not even trying to say that we're like wasting all of the money we put into the military. Some of it's going to good research and things, but it's such a major part of the economics of the United States that you have to get into these hyperbolic defense arguments. If someone says maybe we should spend a little less money on the military, you basically have to respond with, what, do you want no military at all and you're going to just let people roll in here and take over? You're a terrible person. Because you have to have this super strict defense of the military in order to uphold like half of our economy.
So, well, if we go even just a little bit, that's tens and hundreds of billions of dollars that's not being spent this way. Huh. Well, maybe it is time to readjust our sort of priorities, but it doesn't have to be all at once. But come on, guys.
Yeah, I mean that's part of the thing. No one wants to see it as a readjustment because if you move things around, maybe the state that's getting all this funding for building military jets won't get all the funding that we get for, say, building solar panels somewhere else. Like, it's the readjustments that scare people, and they want to equate that with, the ruination of the world.
So it's catastrophizing is the word.
Yeah, and the catastrophizing automatically leads to this, pacifism is always absolute pacifism.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you do have this kind of interesting moral argument, though, with having this massive military that before a couple years ago, when we started moving more isolationist-y, you kind of had this America as the police force of the world idea.
Yeah.
It's argued how well it was actually utilized, and if one nation should have the power to police the rest of the world, you get into that kind of argument. But it arguably does get into some forms of conditional pacifism.
Yes.
As we saw in the earlier episode with the energy beings, we have the military might to back up an idea of enforced pacifism elsewhere in the world.
We are capable and able to project our power, and thus we don't have to actually, worry too much about the situation.
And there is a moral argument for the idea that you can use a overwhelming force of power to kind of enforce peace because you have become the deterrent.
Yes.
It's kind of the thing that they do with Dr. Manhattan in the Watchmen comics, having a being that is so powerful that you can't have a war because he will just stop you.
You'll stop fighting because he said so, or you won't exist because he said so. And so it kind of is a big disincentive. We've talked about ethics of time travel and such quite a bit previously. How do you feel about these currents here?
I mean, I guess it's gravity waves and similar.
Yeah, it sort of, I guess, in this episode treats time very much in a fluid fashion. It's sort of creating these pulses initially when they're first encountering the planet, and when they're back in the past, Spock's like, there's maybe sort of currents of times that will just sort of happen to bring us, in conjunction with McCoy, because otherwise there's no reason for us to be here. And I didn't really feel good about that, honestly.
You're arguably working with the predestination paradox in this episode.
A little bit. Yes.
I'm suddenly forgetting the term, but there's a philosophical idea of time, that time is not something that actually moves and progresses. It just happens to be the way that we have to perceive it.
Yeah, sort of a static universe where the universe is kind of technically set in stone, but we can only see the now of it.
Kind of, yes. But also that a time period, like, let's say in this episode, saying Edith Keeler in the 1930s would be the same thing as saying Edith Keeler in America. It's just it happens to be a location they are in that exists the same as any other location. The fact that we lack the ability to freely travel there makes no difference.
Well, time and space are linked together, but it's the whole, getting from one place to another that's always the problem.
But that leads to an interesting thing, because if you're looking at it philosophically from a viewpoint that all of these places just exist as like locations, someone living in the past has the same rights as a person living in your present.
Yes.
So letting someone die in the past to save someone in the future is pretty much morally indefensible, because they should have an equal right to existence.
So, in other words, Kirk is effectively a murder by negligence. There we go.
Yeah, which I had trouble finding how morally responsible are you if you let someone die through inaction.
And me and my sort of like, there's got to be a different way. There's got to be a third option sort of stuff, and these sort of moral quandaries that given that Kirk is back in the past now, and if he wished to both have his Star Trek future and save Edith Keeler, the options presented to him are more numerous than he seems to conceive.
Yeah, my initial thought was just grab her and bring her to the future with you, you idiot.
That is one option, yes. Grab Edith, and say that, oh yeah, she died in a car accident last week, guys. Didn't you know that? And then just kind of, wave it away around, and then suddenly she's alive in the future.
Yeah, which is, I think, is the plot of a Outer Limits episode.
Sweet. I think it's also a plot of, this, I forget the name of the movie, but basically the people from the future go back in time and take people off airplanes they're about to crash and transport them into their future, because their world is dying. So it's like, we need people on the other side of this catastrophe. But and so you another option is you save Edith, and you either convince her to tone down this absolute pacifism stuff until after the Nazis are defeated, or alternatively you stay behind in the past and campaign against her, and then you have this sort of weird adversarial love relationship sort of thing, maybe. But that would be like a whole different show. Probably not workable for Star Trek.
I'm kind of reminded of the Asimov time. Dang, I've just read this book. The Asimov had sort of a time bureau idea.
Oh, is this the one with like the you go different levels and there's like different
End of Infinity. There we go.
Yeah.
It basically dealt with this idea that humans don't know what's good for you, because the entire conceit is that your people keep messing with history to try to ensure a like consistently good timeline.
Mm-hmm.
The way that they mess with history leads to it being so static and unchanging that there's no human advancement, and eventually you reach a point where we can't continue to advance and everyone dies out.
The things there was no quote struggle to fight against that will push people to be trying to seek betterness or something like that.
Not exactly that, just the people who were in charge of deciding what was a good outcome had a certain set of values that they kept enforcing across all of time.
Come on, guys, you're taking away people's right to choose these things. Come on.
And we hit that with these kinds of episodes. It's arguably the same kind of thing we hit with our ideas on natural conservation now. You have this idea that the change in the timeline is always bad because it's different from what you have. And it's always framed as, somebody went back in time and interfered, and we have to go stop that because, they made a change, and therefore that's bad. But we don't know that them changing the timeline is necessarily bad. We don't have enough information.
And who knows, maybe in this alternative timeline where Edith dies and the Nazis are able to push their agenda forward. Maybe the Nazis are later defeated totally, and the Earth is united under a peaceful civilization. There's no eugenics war. There's no World War III, and we're able to get to the Star Trek idealistic future a lot sooner. They just happen to not have an Enterprise over that planet at that moment.
Yeah, we basically have no idea what else happens in these alternate timelines.
Yeah, it's like, well, we kind of have an idea up to this point, but that's about it.
It reminds me of this idea that we have in environmental conservation, that basically, like, a human interference is, inherently bad and we need to fix whatever we did, which I'm not arguing against. It just reminded me of this. Keeping things as static as possible is kind of the thing that we've had in environmental conservation for a long time. Like, a species is dying out and we have to come help it because that's what we're doing as humans. And arguably, if human activity caused the species to die out and we can do something about that, that's probably good. But, you definitely have this ebb and flow of things in nature that we are still trying to wrap our heads around how much to interfere with. And again, I'm not trying to argue that we shouldn't. It's just an interesting parallel in my mind.
In the long scope of things, species do evolve, species do occasionally die out and all that. But, given the pure rate of which things have been, being killed off due to human activities, it sort of has, kind of enforced this sort of a viewpoint that, any species going extinct is probably our fault right now.
That's probably a good tactic to take. Though you also hit the thing that, several years ago we decided that forest fires were inherently bad things, and we suppressed them for years and years and years. And then later we discovered that actually they were a super vital part of the ecosystem that we shouldn't have been suppressing, and now we've messed up everything.
And now there's massive forest fires because, well, there's all this extra wood here that didn't burn previously in smaller forest fires. So you get, large sections of California on fire kind of perpetually now.
It's that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting to me. They never once in any of these time travel narratives examine whether or not they should be trying to return the timeline to normal.
Funnily enough, I've been watching some Stargate again recently.
Yes.
And I actually got onto an episode that kind of, does a little bit of time travel manipulation. They first screw up the timeline, and that's, it's like leads to all sorts of horrible things that will eventually lead to the Earth's destruction. But so that's considered bad. But the eventual timeline that they do end up with is changed from the original one, but only just enough to prevent them from going back in time in the first place. It's like, well, I was thinking about going back in time to go pick up this bit of alien technology here, but I guess since we now have it because our past selves hid it away in the right place for us to find it, we don't have to now.
Yeah, that was a fun episode.
Yes. Well, I guess it all worked out. Cool.
You get into some of those weird temporal paradoxes. That's one of the only times I can remember that they intentionally made a temporal paradox for the benefit of their future selves.
Yes.
Or past selves, depending on which direction you're looking at it.
Yeah, I guess it's sort of we're to the point, though, that, well, everything's already screwed up, and this might be the best outcome we can do is a future that's almost exactly what we're living, but just slightly different.
Yeah.
So yeah, they found a harmonious way to change the past.
I don't know how I feel about the predestination paradox in this episode. Because in the original script, that was another change that I feel like they could have used to better effect in the episode. Is in the original script, the Guardians, who are large 8-foot-tall aliens in the original version and not a big stone gate.
They're huge and large.
Yeah, they flat out tell Kirk what went wrong. They go, hey, your doctor went back. Well, not the doctor in that episode. There was this weird convoluted subplot about a guy selling drugs on the Enterprise that they took to the planet to be summarily executed, which was odd. But
yeah, that seems a bit more complicated than it needed to be.
Yeah, that's some of the fluff they probably should have cut out.
Yeah.
They get down to the planet. Guy goes back in time. The Guardians go, hey, this guy prevented this woman from being killed, and that messed up your timeline. And then Kirk has to go back in time to make sure that she's killed, and then falls in love with her and starts questioning the entire endeavor.
Well, that seems more, I guess, focused, and because then there's no having to sort of derp around with radio equipment and try to we have to open up our tricorder but we don't have a computer to read it properly, sort of stuff.
Yeah, there was a lot of that whole computer thing was kind of fluff that was unnecessary. His whole bantering about needing to buy platinum was it was fun. It developed a little bit of character, but it was unnecessary. Yeah. The thing with them stealing the tools that apparently mean he doesn't need platinum anymore was unnecessary.
So it's just sort of all these little bits that were fun and interesting, but not useful for the plot.
Yeah, which is weird because they cut out a lot of the original script for time, like the whole drug selling subplot, the entire thing with it being an actual populated city full of aliens.
Yeah.
There was an entire action sequence where they went back up to the Enterprise and discovered that in this timeline it was run by space pirates. So they cut out a lot of stuff, but then they just added in a bunch of fluff for no reason.
I guess they needed, someone decided that this new fluff needed to be in there for reasons, I guess.
You could have expanded the love story and let Kirk and Edith have more than 4 scenes together.
Heck, maybe even cut in in media res, where Spock and Kirk have just arrived in the past, and we sort of learn what they're there to do as things go forward, and only even see the Guardian at the end or something like that.
Yeah, you could have done that. I mean, it doesn't really matter because I liked how brief the future setup was. It took about 10 minutes.
Yeah,
that was fine. But then most of the stuff they did in the past was pointless.
Yep.
And I felt it was more pointless because you never got any doubt that Kirk was going to let this woman die. Especially now. I could see the first time you watch it and they're like, which of these timelines are we doing? And you're like, oh, we don't know if he has to save her or kill her. This is a big mystery thing. Since we went into this with all this foreknowledge, knowing that she's got to die in the end of the episode, all that was they could have set that up a lot better.
I guess this maybe draws attention to the problem with mystery stories, that once you've sort of experienced one, experienced the whole thing once, it kind of loses luster to a certain degree.
Well, unless it's a very well set up mystery story.
Indeed.
You see, this is the problem with twist endings. A good twist ending, you watch the thing and then you see the twist, and then you want to watch it again to see all the stuff that you missed where they were setting it up and they made it completely obvious. This is the difference between Sixth Sense and Fight Club.
Yes. Wait a moment. There was some weirdness earlier. Oh no. Or Memento. It's oh yeah, so this is the guy. Wait, no, this isn't the guy. Guy was somebody else entirely. Oh god.
Yeah, if they set up a good twist, watching the movie over and over just shows you how well they set up the twist. If it's a bad twist, it's well, that didn't make any sense.
Alternatively, we could always go the Clue route. Just have different endings.
I still like the idea that they go through this thing. They have Kirk go through his stupid emotional payoff thing where he lets Edith die. They go back to the future. It's what happened? Everything's the same. It's no, you didn't save the person you needed to save. It was Milk Dude.
Yep. Come on, guy. What do you do? You have to go back in time again. Oh, man.
You don't have time to save Edith, though. You have to deal with Milk Guy.
Because you see, maybe it was Milk Guy that pushed Edith in front of the car in the first place, and it looked like an accident.
Or maybe he led the anti-pacifist movement. You don't know.
Yeah.
They were weirdly okay with this guy comically shooting himself.
It's what was the point of that? I don't know.
Which just also, if you think about it too much, which is basically why I started doing this, he is leaning into this idea that there are just garbage people. She says it in the beginning of her speech. there are some people who just can't get off the booze and can't work hard enough and can't apply yourself. You cannot be part of my glorious future.
And thus you will be ignored. You must get out now.
This poor homeless dude who was affected by the Great Depression and has to steal milk from doorsteps to survive shoots himself and no one notices or cares, and it has no effect on the timeline because he was a useless garbage person.
Dang it, Edith. Why do you have to be so mean?
Like, that did not endear me to her in the way that I think it was supposed to.
I think to a certain degree it's supposed to sort of try to drive up the notion that she's sort of someone of this time period who is, strong work ethic, etc., sort of stuff. We've seen a bazillion times in the show so far. And she has to sort of, endorse that before she goes idealistic.
Yeah,
or
good
something.
old Puritan values before you get into the actual, like, this is a good person who we're supposed to be sorry to see die.
Yeah.
We don't see enough. They have so much stupid stuff about building the computer and Kirk just woodenly announcing he's in love with people and talking about alien authors for no reason. We don't get very much
set up. We don't know if they're actually aliens.
Well, yeah, that's true. They just lived on a different planet. We don't get any setup of her altruism. We get like a little bit. She runs a food kitchen. She runs a soup kitchen. That's the entire extent we see of her altruism, which is good. But the way that they're talking about her is like she's some sort of nigh god being that can convince the United States not to enter World War II.
Yeah, well, the bits of information we have about her is the soup kitchen. She seems okay with people who steal things because she's totally F the police and all that. She's also super willing to hide people who are very addled in the back room, for better or worse, even if they seem to be acting in a fashion that may be a little bit dangerous for your own personal safety. So what else do we got? We got her speechiness there, and she likes Clark Gable movies.
Yeah, and the speech was pretty iffy. Was mostly, I predict a future of glorious nuclear energy.
Cool, but what else you got?
Yeah, I just feel like they definitely didn't set her up badly, but they could have used some of their wasted time to set her up better, and they could have set up the love story better. And I completely agree that Kirk just closing his eyes and letting her get run over undercuts the emotional message.
Yeah, you want to do I got a nitpicky thing if you're willing for it.
Nitpicking, sure, why not?
So the prohibition, is this whole 18th Amendment sort of thing where they ban booze alcohol in the United States, right?
Yep.
So this story takes place in 1930, but prohibition didn't end until 1933. So who's on the booze here, lady?
Everyone. Prohibition increased the amount of like drunkenness in the United States.
True. Speakeasies everywhere. Wait a moment. She's actually running a speakeasy.
Probably. Like, especially in Manhattan, the entire underground bar scene in Manhattan was huge.
In fact, a lot of like modern day bars got their start there. I keep forgetting this takes place in New York. Sorry. Like, wait a moment, because all the sets feel like Southern California, honestly. But,
yeah, they do. I was trying to figure out where they were to get that clear of a view of the Brooklyn Bridge, honestly, because that's somewhere near Chinatown.
Well, they did take this, that bit of footage in the 60s most likely. So, the exact location might have like buildings in it now. So
yeah, it could. Also, you can't see any stars.
Yeah. Well, maybe it was a really long exposure still shot.
Maybe. I haven't seen Orion since I moved here.
Well, it's still there, I'm pretty sure, though I don't really see much of the sky where I'm at right now. Too close to Cincinnati.
Light pollution.
Also, it's really cloudy all the time right now. The clouds I'm seeing outside are all sorts of spooky-like. Anywho, where are we?
I don't know. I have the definite impression that we're running out of things, which is disappointing. So everyone talks about this as like the best piece of sci-fi thing to come out of this series, and I honestly found it a lot more empty on a philosophical level than some other episodes we've seen.
A little disappointing.
It was written better. It was definitely written better.
Written better. Some of the acting from like especially like McCoy really kind of plays up that paranoia sort of streak he's going through there, and it's both ridiculous and it's like, okay, this is very much serving the plot how you're overacting here, but So I kind of work with that. I guess I sort of overliked, generally liked his performance there, but Kirk and Shatner's always kind of there.
Yeah.
Spock was all right.
I'm really hoping that I just have some different tastes to a lot of the people who talk about this show. Because if this is supposed to be the best thing that we get, this was a very resounding fine for me. This was like a fine episode. It probably isn't even my like absolute favorite one we've seen. It's just better written and has some okay acting and character interaction in it.
I guess to steal a term from SF debris, all series are rated on compared to their own series as opposed to each other. So compared to other sci-fi, this is kind of lackluster overall, but this is on the better end for me on the original series here.
Well, speaking of it, my girlfriend's been doing this thing where she will point out which Next Generation episode seems to be a soft remake of the original series episodes. This one definitely seems to be going for the episode Yesterday's Enterprise, when the old Enterprise gets pulled through a time warp out of defending a Klingon colony and throws the Federation into war with the Klingon Empire.
So we got ourselves a dark future now. And we basically got to send these people back in time so they can die, so they can demonstrate that to the Klingons that, hey, these Federation people do have honor and they are willing to fight, as opposed to...
Yeah. And we won't go too into it, because I do hope to get there one day, but...
Yeah. Don't worry, guys. We'll get to Next Generation eventually.
They definitely they have a woman who is sacrificed for the good of the future. She decides to do it and basically goes against orders in order to do it. She's very committed to the idea.
Saying, well, it's going to suck for me, but let's do this.
She's not just incidentally killed for no reason because she's crossing the street to see some people who shouldn't have been there in the first place.
Indeed. It does kind of beg the question, though. What was Edith's other date with a front end of a car going to be like?
That's true. Well, let's see.
Milk guy.
1930s was still early car stuff.
Yeah, they did have a one horse-drawn carriage there with the milkman, but I don't remember anything else there.
So you were still in the time period where cars, people in cars, shared the road. Mm-hmm. And it was incredibly dangerous. And cars, there's if you watch that Adam Ruins Everything series, he does a really good synopsis of this. But the car manufacturers basically made up an incredibly offensive slur for people who got hit by their dangerous, unregulated death machines in order to convince people to like cars more than pedestrians.
And that still kind of is the thing today, because, I definitely run into a number of folks these people, walking in the middle of the street, they're just awful and all this. And, people on bikes or motorcycles, they're just as bad.
Yeah, it was exactly that. The thing that we kind of forget is, the J in jaywalking was actually an incredibly offensive slur at the time.
Oh, dear. I guess I'm glad I don't got context for that.
Yeah. Other people have written about this. It's pretty easy to look up if you look at the history of cars in the United States. But it's pretty awful manipulation by a large corporate entity that was trying to sell super expensive things to people that reshaped the way we have, mass transit in the United States. And kept me from being able to walk easily.
Damn it. I do appreciate crosswalks, but there needs to be more of them. Mm-hmm. There's just so much in the U.S. that's not good for pedestrians at this point. There are massive, amounts of communities that you need a car in order to get anywhere.
I do think it's interesting, actually, if you look at this episode thinking about that, no one gives a second thought to the car.
Yeah.
It's all framed around Kirk let her die, and you even have this thing of she's just wandering through the middle of the street. The person in the car bears a lot of responsibility for this.
Wait. Is this giving us an out to prevent Kirk from having any moral responsibility on this?
I mean, arguably he has a bit of moral responsibility, but there's an equal amount of moral responsibility on the driver it's never addressed.
Yes. In fact, do we even see the driver?
No.
There's people to like go and check, Edith there on the ground there, but I don't know if any of them are actually the driver.
In fact, the moral message of the episode is drive recklessly because you're saving the world from Nazis.
Hooray! That's a weird message. Well, I guess we can run over Nazis with our car.
No, don't go there.
Yeah, there's some darkness there.
It is time. Let's just move. It's time for the galaxy's favorite game show.
Yeah, please. Rescue us, game show.
Ouch. Okay, Isaacs. Award time. Let's forget we talked about that.
Yes, welcome to the award section of the program, where we're going to forget about everything we just talked about, because, so the first award for their high score and some time travel shenanigans goes to Guardian of Forever. They get the Time Warp Award. What do they win, Gipwin?
Alright, this is the 4th time we've done the Time Warp Award. Let's do the Time Warp again.
Let's do the Time Warp again. It's just a jump to the left. And a step to the right. Put your hands on your hips.
That's probably enough. We're good.
Good idea. Oh, what do they win? Is it the Time Warp?
They win awkward singing, and there you go.
Good work, Guardian Forever. Keep up the good time travel work. Our second award is the Good Idea Wrong Time, apparently. Award which goes to Edith for, well, being all about the peaceful, coexistence of all people, just apparently in the wrong time, apparently. What does she win, Gipwin?
Edith wins a copy of the Anarchist's Cookbook, because apparently it's the only way you're getting anything done, Edith. Sorry.
Well, I hope she makes good use of it in that other timeline. Anyway, our third award is the Antifa OG Award, which goes to Kirk for making sure the future is able to punch Nazis. What does he win, Gepwin?
Kirk wins some very conflicted feelings, given that current Kirk and past Kirk was actually like a big fascist apologist right-wing douchebag.
Yes. Shatner is very disappointing. We got a fourth award, a late arrival into the whole scene here. It is Where Are the Guards Award again. Once more, it appears up, and it's going to Transporter Guy, who gets himself knocked out by McCoy's karate chops. What does he win, Gipwin?
I think the Transporter Guy and all of the Transporter Guys need some helmets. They keep getting knocked out very easily.
Yes, it'll save them both in terms of concussions and, bad work evaluations down the line.
I feel like there's a reason security guards are always wearing hats.
Yes. It's to keep you from being so easily, punched in the face, or back of the head, or anywhere else in that general head region. So I'd like to congratulate all the winners today. Thank you very much, everybody.
Yes, I hope you enjoyed the time that you spent here on the Galaxy's favorite game show.
Woo, yay!
Oh, we're almost done.
Yes. Holy smokes. There's just like the one more episode done, and then we're done with the season. What's this new episode about?
Next episode is called Operation Annihilate.
Annihilate?
Yes, it's a very odd title. I remember seeing this episode. There's some sort of amoeba-looking squid things. And
I remember this one too, yeah.
Spock has a very, very pointless injury.
I remember one line near the end where McCoy says, I was so worried about his Vulcan eyes, I didn't think about his Vulcan ears or something like that.
Yeah, I have a feeling the next episode is just going to be McCoy's racism. And I definitely remember the central conflict of the episode is pointlessly resolved.
And in fact, it's so pointlessly resolved that they actually try something and they're like, wait, we don't even need to do it that much.
Yeah.
We overkill.
I guess that'll be a nice break for the last episode here.
Something silly and kind of pointless.
Yep, you can join us for that next week when we watch Operation Annihilate on Watchers of Tomorrow.
Next time on Watchers of Tomorrow, the crew meets some friendly brain slugs who want the best for you, really! You have been listening to Watchers of Tomorrow, a podcast on science fiction media. Find and follow Watchers of Tomorrow on Podbean, YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, Spreader, Digital Podcast, and perhaps many more to come. If you enjoy our podcast, make sure to subscribe for more. And where possible, make sure to rate your experience or leave us a review. You may find Gepwin on youtube.com/Gepwin and Twitter @Gepwin. You may find me, Dr. Isix, on youtube.com/Dr. Isix and Twitter @IsixLP. Music is Waveform and Mori's Principle, both by DRKRN. You can also check out the Watchers of Tomorrow Discord channel. Make sure to share the experience with your friends, family, enemies, and alien overlords. If you feel you are suffering from transporter syndrome, please be aware that the next time you step off the transporter, that you, that is now, no longer exists.